We are live, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be back for AIB members and the public at large. We are now in session for our April 7th meeting. Our meeting today will be divided into two parts. We'll go through a number of legislative and administrative matters first, and then we will have a closed session to discuss some additional items that are not we cannot discuss publicly. Let me first of all thank all of you for being here today, and thank the staff for all the work that you've been doing under some very difficult and challenging circumstances and conditions. As I've indicated in the past, we're sort of flying the plane as we build it. In many ways, we're building it, and that it is coming together. Hopefully, we will have all things fully capable of flying in the direction we want in a few weeks. We have a number of important dates that are coming up in the very near future that will help us to establish some of our goals and objectives. Some additional training sessions that are scheduled for us in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to urge everyone to be diligent and responsive to the request to sort of pinpoint those dates down, because they are important for us to do so in order to meet our deadline for this December and getting the comprehensive plan ready for presentation. It requires a great deal of work on all of our parts to make sure that we are participating, fully engaged, and involved in the process as best as possible. With that, I'll come back with some closing remarks in a few minutes, but I want to turn it over to Rachel to go through some of the legislative changes and some of the administrative things that we're doing before we go into closed session. Rachel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first legislative update pertains to the legislation that the General Assembly was considering in response to, at least in part, in response to the AIB's recommendations regarding the deadlines in the statute for the comprehensive plan, for the AIB to complete the plan, and then also for the LEAs to submit the plans. And so that is House Bill 1450, and the bill has passed both houses of the General Assembly with some amendments, and has been sent to the governor for his he can either sign it, he can let it go into effect without his signature, or he can veto it. And so, at least as of the last time I checked, he hasn't acted on that yet, but he will be making that decision very soon. And so in the bill, and I sent you all a link to that, but I can put it on the screen if that's helpful. I'll do that.
Why don't you sort of summarize it for the public, in case people may not be aware of what we're talking about here?
Absolutely. So what the bill does, and you should see it on your screen now, is House Bill 1450. It has the this is just all the technical pieces of it. So I'll just kind of go through it real quickly. They did make a change to the concentration of poverty grants to allow the funds that the schools receive, the per pupil funding that's used for wraparound services. They extended the time that the schools can use the funds essentially to satisfy the curriculum and instruction requirements for all schools that MSDE has. So that is this provision here in 5223. They also added to this December 122 reporting date. This is a report that MSDE is already required to submit on December 1st, and or I think actually November 1st, and they added an additional provision that requires the department to actually submit data based on the this is related to the poverty indicator that is used to measure low-income students and currently we use free and reduced price meal counts as our primary methodology. This report, MSD will be making a recommendation as to whether that should continue to be used or another poverty indicator should be used. And this provision here requires MSDE to submit the data that would allow whatever they recommend to be used in next year's budget formula calculations by this December 1st deadline to both the AIB and DBM. So that's that provision. Another amendment that you see, so everything that is in a underlined are amendments, and italics versus non-italics indicate whether it was the first house or the second house that made the amendment. At this point, it doesn't matter really, but this provision that they added, the Senate actually added, it's a couple pages of amendments that relate to the maintenance of effort requirement. There was legislation that was separate legislation was introduced during session to address maintenance of effort, which is, as a reminder, maintenance of effort is the amount that each county is required to appropriate to their school system. And it is based on the highest appropriation from the prior year that's then put on a per student basis and then multiplied by the upcoming or the current year's enrollment. And because of the impact of the pandemic on student enrollment counts, both last year and again this year, the General Assembly has acted to modify the maintenance of effort requirement so that counties are not able to reduce their appropriation to the school systems. And so essentially that is what all of this language does, again, for fiscal 23. And there's an additional provision that allows counties for fiscal 24, it allows counties to not have to maintain this additional funding that they're required to put in fiscal 23. So that is that provision. And then here on page 8 are the date changes that the AIB had recommended related to the timeline for the comprehensive implementation plan. So the final plan will be due on December 1st. And the LEAs and the other entities that will need to submit plans to the AIB, those will be due on March 15th. This provision here relates to MSDE developing the criteria that they're going to recommend that the AIB use to approve or disapprove plans, and that date is what the AIB had recommended of September 1st. And then another recommendation of the AIB, this relates to the criteria for the release of LEA funds in fiscal 23. You may recall that the automatic withholding of a portion of the increase in blueprint funding that begins in fiscal 23, and under the original law, the criteria that would be used for the release of funds in fiscal 23 included approval of the plans. But given the delay, the change in the timeline for when the LEAs will submit their plans, the AIB, MSD had brought up a concern that the timing wouldn't allow for the plans to be approved and the funds to be released and spent in fiscal 23. And so this provision for fiscal 23 limits the criteria for release of funds to the school system submitting their plans by the new deadline of March 15th, 2023, and a plan that meets the minimum guidelines for submission, which the AIB will be determining. And then the other recommendation of the AIB had been related to the the college and career ready support pathways. And this provision here is revising the timeline to add 1 year so that the LEAs are not expected to begin implementing those support pathways this fall, because that was not feasible. And giving this additional year and also the opportunity for the AIB and MSDE and stakeholders to go through the comprehensive plan process and really determine what timeline is feasible. And then the next section here was not, it is related to the blueprint. It is not related to anything that the AIB made any recommendations about, but essentially what the General Assembly is doing is altering how the tax revenues that are dedicated, the sales tax revenues that are dedicated to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, which is helping to pay for the implementation of the blueprint over the full implementation period, how that those funds are determined to make it less complicated. Right now, it's a complicated process based on online sales tax revenues and digital downloads, where essentially the comptroller's office is having to sort of look at each transaction to determine whether the funds should be dedicated to the blueprint fund. So instead of that, the legislation is dedicating, a specific percentage of sales tax revenues to the blueprint fund. And you can see that there was a change from a higher percentage to a lower percentage. What these percentages do is the new percentages will provide about $100 million more than under current law each year to the blueprint fund. And in addition to that, and the reason the percentages are slightly lower in the amendment is because the final legislation actually dedicates 800 million of the surplus income tax revenues that are projected for fiscal 23 to go into the blueprint fund to support the blueprint fund implementation. So that is a significant increase in the funds going to the blueprint fund, and that will allow the revenues that are projected to be in the fund to cover the implementation of the blueprint, well into fiscal 26 and likely fiscal 27. So that basically covers the bill. The only other provision here, it was an AIB recommendation. This relates to allowing the AIB and other entities that are receiving supplementary appropriation funds from the sports gaming revenues during this current fiscal year to retain those funds if they're unspent at the end of the fiscal year and be able to use them in fiscal 23. And that recommendation was made because of the timing of when the gaming revenues are going to be available to be appropriated, which will be very near the end of the fiscal year, and there wouldn't be an opportunity for the AIB or these other entities to spend the funds. So that covers the legislation. I'll stop sharing that.
Were there anything outside of the this particular area that would impact us as well?
There is a separate piece of legislation that makes some changes to the consortium. We haven't talked about this very much up to this point, but they're part of the blueprint law that was added by the General Assembly, so it was not part of the commission's recommendations. Has to do with creating a consortium that will within the Community Health Resources Commission, which is within the Department of Health, to deal with, to address student behavioral health needs and mental health needs and issues. And it is the AIB, it's part of the blueprint law, and it's certainly part of the structure, but the AIB itself is not involved in the implementation of that consortium. But it does have a number of different players. It essentially has a little sort of similar to the CTE committee, and the AIB's role with the CTE committee. The consortium has an appointed group that has not been fully appointed yet, that is going to oversee that program. And then obviously they will report back to the AIB. So it makes some technical changes. It alters the flow of the funding it phases up to the full program funding amount, which was originally $125 million. It does add $5 million to that. So in the final year, which I think is fiscal 27, if I'm remembering correctly, they would get $130 million. I think that additional funding is mostly related to the administrative costs, ongoing administrative costs.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there is one more piece I'll just make you aware of. It doesn't, and it actually kind of also relates to the budget, which is the other piece of the legislative update. There is a provision in the one of the supplemental budgets. The governor did provide $500 for each educator support personnel in the schools for fiscal 23 as a bonus, like a one-time bonus. And then there's also legislation that is making its way through both houses that would provide that the one-time bonus a second time in fiscal 24. So I think you probably have all had some folks comment to you about the concerns for those employees that aren't part of the educator career ladder. And so those education support personnel are certainly part of that discussion.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions or comments on the legislative wrap up?
Rachel, was this bill passed in the time frame where the governor has to respond before the General Assembly adjourns?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
So what that means is that if the governor does choose to veto the bill, the General Assembly would have the opportunity to override the veto before session ends. Right. On Monday at midnight. Is sine die, is Monday at midnight. So yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Rachel. And let me also thank the board for its work in helping us to formulate our response to some of the earlier questions. It appears as though what we suggested the General Assembly was willing to adopt and support us on. So thank you all for your work in helping us to formulate a response that I think sort of in some way moderated, but also aided the board in some of what we wanted to do. And I think there was only one significant area where we probably disagreed a little bit. So I think this has worked out fairly well, and we'll come back to address those things a little bit later on in the comprehensive plan down the line. Okay, administrative comments or remarks you'd like to make, Rachel, at this time?
Yeah, so as part of the budget update, the AIB did receive its full funding amount for fiscal 23, which is $4.8 million. And so that will begin coming through on July 1st. And we also received all of the positions that the governor had proposed. So 5 positions that will be available very soon, hopefully. The budget passed on Friday, so I've already actually been in touch with the Department of Budget and Management to see, what the timeline is for the positions becoming available. And then we will have another 10 positions that will be available on July 1st. Yeah. So, and then the only budget language that was added to the budget related to the AIB just has to do with the General Assembly requested that the AIB develop what are called managing for results measures, which every agency in state government provides as part of the budgeting process in terms of performance metrics and goals or targets. So we will be working on those over the summer so that they can be submitted with our budget request, which will probably be in early September.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So that means that we will be doing some recruitment soon, which will be really good. But I did want to introduce everyone to our first official employee. His name is Graham Hardig, and he has come aboard as the management associate for the AIB. And he is going to be providing administrative support and crucially helping get the website up and running. We have entered into an agreement with Do It to develop a website finally. So we're very excited about that. So for everyone, members, you've already met Graham, and the public, you'll be seeing his face and hearing his name.
Congratulations, Graham, and thank you for coming aboard. Let me also mention again about this website, because it is crucial for us to get that done, but get that completed as quickly as possible. It is holding up our final stage of getting the advisory board into place. So I know that Joe had done a great deal of work at helping us get to this point, but unfortunately, we need to make sure we do this right. And the right way to do it is to ensure that we can have a place where people can, in effect, respond to requests for interest. And the website is crucial for that, as well as many other things. It also impacts us in terms of providing opportunities for people to sign up to participate for a hearing or to make comments or send information in for us. So this is crucial for us to administratively do many of the other substantive things that we have on the back burner. And that's one of the more important ones, that is the advisory boards.
Absolutely. So I don't want to overpromise, but certainly in May, we will have a website up and running in May. Hopefully the earlier side of May than the later side of May.
Thank you. Okay.
I do see that Mr. Manco has a question.
Yeah, Rachel, I wanted to see if we could get just an update on the staffing plan and what you're thinking around staffing structure. I mean, I know it seems like in short order, we will be looking to hire folks. So, do we have any idea on what positions we are looking for? And this is an opportunity to talk through that a little bit in case there are, individuals who, we can either reach out to via our networks, or, that now that this is a public session and people can help us get the word out that we're looking for really, really effective, qualified people to serve in these positions.
Sure. So we will be hiring for, essentially policy analysts with expertise in the various subject areas that the blueprint covers. So early childhood, curriculum and assessment, teacher preparation, college and career readiness, community schools, and all of the, different supports for students who need additional needs, or English learners, and of course, special education students. We're going to be looking for researchers who have some experience with both program evaluation and ideally different top performing systems around the world and best practices, and also strategic planning, working with school systems. I think we definitely want to, we'll be looking for, we want to get a good balance of diversity and also practitioners and versus folks who, you know, are more, have spent more of their career in maybe in academia. So we want to get a balance there. Next steps are going to be working on some position descriptions and getting those recruitment notices posted. They will be posted on the DBM website, but also we want our website up and running so that we can really get the word out through our website and obviously through all the folks that you guys know and other stakeholders out there. So I would think in the next month or so, we'll try to get some recruitment notices posted. Oh, and also I will say, we are looking for an office manager, administrative fiscal person as well, that can handle the budget and procurements and all of the office logistical things that need to happen that are really crucial to getting us up and running.
Attorney too, right? Attorney.
Yes, there will be an assistant attorney general. The attorney general's office handles the recruitment for that position, so that will not be through the AIB, but yes.
And so where are we with that?
Last time I spoke with the attorney general's office, they were going to get this process started, but they did need to wait. You know, essentially you can't recruit for a position until you actually have the position. So now that the budget is passed, the positions are actually available. And so the process can really officially begin. So that's on my list to follow up with the Attorney General's office. And as soon as we can get these positions, that's why I reached out to DBM to see what the timeline is for creating the positions. There is budget passes, but they don't just magically appear in the system. There's a back end process that hopefully is not too time consuming. Were there any other questions?
Joe, was that it?
Yeah, no, just thanks so much for the update. And if there's anything that we can do to help, you know, I'm definitely here to support, and I feel like I speak for the rest of the board, whatever we can do to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anything else you need to add administratively, Rachel?
I'll check my list here. I think the only other thing, and I believe you have all received emails from the Ethics Commission, but the financial disclosure statements are due by the end of the month. So please make sure that you've done that. If you haven't heard from the Ethics Commission, please let me know. And also, when you do file, please let us know that you've filed.
Rachel, I don't believe I've gotten a notice from the Ethics Commission.
Okay.
Have others?
I have not.
I have not.
I received an email that indicated that they were reminding me, but I had not received an initial one.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry. So Dr. Kerwin.
The link that people could have to go online to do it.
Okay. We'll get that to you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Is that it, Rachel?
That is it, other than talking about the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 25th at 3 p.m. And at that time, we will be discussing the MSDE's proposed regulations related to educator preparation programs and also educator certification requirements. And as part of the blueprint, the MSDE is required to consult with the AIB before promulgating regulations that relate to aspects of the blueprint. And so these proposed regulations do incorporate several provisions of the blueprint law. So we'll be discussing that. MSDE is in the process of compiling the public comments that they have received on these regulations. They've been out for public comment for a number of months now, and they've received, I believe, a lot of public comments. So they will be sharing all that information with me to share with you all, hopefully by the end of this week. So on the 25th, I will provide some sort of overview of the regulations and the public comment. And then there is a lot of interest in these regulations and the next steps. And so sort of the process will be that the AIB, MSD will, through this process, be consulting with the AIB. You all will have an opportunity, if you would like, to provide comments back to MSDE on potential changes to the regulations that have been proposed. And so I think talking with the chair, there's been a number of inquiries about whether the AIB would be having any public testimony on what stakeholders feel about the regulations. And so the plan is to allow for up to 1 hour of public comment at the April 25th meeting. I think what we'll do is we have received through the AIB email address various stakeholders who have asked to be on our mailing list. So we will make sure that we send out to everyone who's requested that the information on how to sign up to testify. But essentially, because we don't have a website yet, we will just do this via the email address, which is aib@maryland.gov. And folks can just send an email to that address with the subject line of April 25th public testimony, and then provide the names, contact information, title, etc. of who would like to testify, as well as they can submit written testimony to the email address. Depending on the number of folks who request to speak, that will in part determine sort of the amount of time that each person has. Typically, for legislative public comment type hearings, it would be limited to 3 minutes, possibly 5 minutes, depending on how many people sign up.
Let me just add that I'm not sure that it is an actual requirement that we do this, but in consultation with Rachel earlier today, given the big interest here, that we've had a variety of sources seeking information and want to have some input, I thought it would be much better for us and for the public if we have a regulatory process whereby we can listen to what many in the community want to say about this and provide us with a backdrop to make some informed input later on. And so this is something that obviously, as we go through the process in the future, we may develop some regulations about formalizing our procedures for public testimony on various issues. But this was a call that I made given the nature of the challenges we face, the number of people who had expressed some interest, that we needed to have a way in which to hear from those rather than to just sort of do this without the maximum level of transparency that I think this requires.
Dr. Stapleton, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had two things I wanted to mention. One, it's fortuitous that this meeting is on April 25th because I will be traveling that day, so won't be able to attend. But this is also one of the areas where I feel like I have to recuse myself from the conversation somewhat because these teacher regulations will affect the programs that are within my college. But I also wanted to ask to understand the timeline a little bit better. And what I understood, so these proposed regulations have been out since last summer. And the comment period was in January. And so the comments MSD has had these comments for a while. And I was under the impression that there would be revisions based on those comments. And I'm just wondering, are we going to get public testimony that are about the original proposed regulations back in the summer? Or will there be revisions that will then have public comment on it? Because I worry that we're just going to hear the same things that we already have comment on prior to a revision process.
I'm not sure whether or not it will carry both of those, but I'm not sure that it's wise for us to dictate what the comments should be and narrow it to that degree. It very well may be that they may go back to some of the earlier things that have already been placed out there for the public review. But if I'm to err, I think I would err on the side of allowing the participants to make their comments rather than to try to narrow it to say you can't comment on X or Y. And that way we will have all the information before us.
Well, I'm just wondering, do we know if they're going to provide revised proposed regs?
I will double check, but I do not believe that they are. They have not, the revisions have not been proposed to the state board yet regarding the regulations. I think we're kind of in a chicken and the egg kind of position. I think MSDE is wanting to do what they're required to do under the law, which is to consult with the AIB. And I guess it's sort of normally if MSDE or the state board, I should say, we're going to adopt revisions to the regulations, they would do that in a meeting all at the same time. And so they wouldn't like say, these are the revisions we're going to adopt, but first we have to have the AIB consult. So I'm not sure, this is the first time that we're dealing with this situation. So obviously it's sort of a dry run to see how this can work in the future. I can certainly, if you would like me to, I can ask MSDE if there are any proposed revisions that they are willing, could be shared.
But wouldn't part of that come out in the consultation portion anyway with us? Whether or not there needs to be any revisions.
That definitely, clearly there are public comments that are asking for revisions. And so sort of part of the process here is the AIB, if you want to recommend specific revisions that the state board should consider.
Right.
Right.
I don't see how you automatically remove it from the table, in that we need to be consulted with, and we can provide information that may go back to say make revisions, and then curtail people from making suggestions about the revisions. So I think that you're right, it's the chicken and egg, but I think we have to take the whole caboodle and listen to whatever they want to say. And our comments is what they are, whether or not they're to the revision or not.
My question was just, it would be helpful if MSDE already knows it's going to revise something, it would be helpful that we didn't waste our time talking about something that is already revised.
I understand, but
yeah,
if the public organizations want to comment on it, I'm not sure how we avoid that.
I would certainly ask.
Whereby it is a fair process for those who want to participate, rather than to receive comments or individual questions that someone calls about, so that we all hear essentially the same thing.
And I will definitely ask MSD if there are any proposed revisions that they would share with the AIB. And then I guess I will just, so then, following the April 25th meeting, the next scheduled meeting is on May 5th. And so, the plan, and I put plan in quotes, the plan is for the AIB to then take up a discussion on May 5th around any proposed revisions that the AIB wants to recommend to MSDE and the state board.
Okay. So that we'll have input on the 25th, reaction, if any, not that we will have any, on May the 5th at that meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further comments or questions?
Is there a point in which the revisions will be presented to the public so that they are able to see, what they have commented on and what they have, surfaced as proposed changes or recommendations have been, I guess, adhered to or addressed?
So the ultimately the public comments on the regulations, I believe, are public information. They're certainly subject to public information. That is exactly what MSD is going to be sharing with the AIB. I don't believe that there is any requirement for the agency to kind of go back and sort of reconcile what comments they've addressed and haven't addressed in whatever revisions they do adopt. And depending on how significant the revisions are, the regulatory process sort of has to start over again. So that can trigger additional public comments on the revisions if they are significant.
Is there anything else before we go into the closed session? If not, then we will adjourn to a closed session in accordance with the Open Meetings Act to discuss confidential requests for proposals and administrative functions. We're going to take 5 minutes to make that transition. And I think you have the link to go for the closed session. So at this point, we will adjourn. We will adjourn from the closed session. Yeah.
Right. Can we take a vote on going into closed session?
Yes, I'm about to do that. All right. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you. 5